Why is everything in black and white?
Welcome to Earth 90214, better known as the Marvel Noir universe. Instead of colorful modern-day Manhattan we see in Marvel stories, the world drops straight into the grim atmosphere of the Great Depression. Crime is everywhere, corruption runs through the streets, and heroes aren't in shining symbols of hope. They're detectives, vigilantes, survivors trying to make it through the broken city. Imagine a classic 1930s film noir mixed with superhero trench coats, smoky alleys, jack clubs, mobsters, and morally gray characters, and the heroes that kicked it all off is Spider-Man Noir.
And somehow, Marvel took Spider-Man and made him into a hard-boiled detective, fighting crime during one of the darkest parts of American history. And it works shockingly well.
Spider-Man Noir became one of the most iconic alternate versions of the wall crawler ever created. While he did appear in the comic of the same name in 2009, but for a lot of people, including myself, the first introduction that I ever was exposed to him was in the video game Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions. That game was honestly ahead of its time because it introduced the idea of multiple Spider-Men crossing universes years before Spider-Verse ever was written in paper. Noir stood out immediately thanks to the darker personality, stealth gameplay, and the gritty world design.
Seriously, while the Amazing Spider-Man was swinging through the bright city of New York's skyline, Spider-Noir was sneaking through the shadows, going to warehouses and punching gangsters in the face while jazz music plays in the background.
And his popularity only grew from here. He later appeared in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, voiced by Nicolas Cage, which was honestly the perfect casting. Cage gave him this dramatic old-school detective vibe that made every line sound hilarious and cool at the same time.
Sometimes I let matches burn down to my fingertips just to feel something, anything. Oh.
Absolute over-the-top noir cinema.
Since then, Spider-Man Noir has become a fan favorite, getting video games, comics, merchandise, and now even a live-action series which has the option to watch in black and white. What started as a weird experimental alternate universe ended up becoming one of the most coolest representations of Spider-Man Marvel has ever made.
And not only is the series a love letter to Spider-Man Noir, but a love letter to the noir genre itself. The term film noir means dark or black film, and was a style used to depict detective crime films that became very popular in the 40s and 50s. In these eras, it was considered the classic time for American film noir.
These films have a very specific style. Heavy shadows, black and white cinematography, cigarette smoking, filling the air, rainy streets, morally conflicted characters. A lot of visual interpretation actually came from German Expressionism, which was used to distort lighting and dramatic camera angles to create tension and unease.
But noir wasn't just about visuals. The stories themselves were dark and cynical. Many of them were inspired by hard-boiled crime fiction published in magazines during the Great Depression. Detectives, corrupt politicians, mobsters, femme fatales, and cities overflowing with dark crime and secrets became the background for these great stories.
Which makes Spider-Man Noir fit perfectly. Instead of Peter Parker being a bright science nerd cracking jokes while swinging around Manhattan, this version is hardened vigilante trying to protect his city ruled by corruption, poverty, and organized crime.
It's basically taking Spider-Man and throwing him into a very gritty detective thriller.
And you can clearly see inspiration of classic noir films like Maltese Falcon, Touch of Evil, and The Big Heat. Those movies helped define the genre with helped mystery plots, morally gray heroes, and oppressive atmosphere.
And noir never truly died. It just simply evolved into what we call neo-noir, where filmmakers modernized the style while keeping the dark themes intact. Movies like Blade Runner, Seven, The Zodiac, and of course, Batman all carry the DNA from the noir craze. The detective storytelling through monologue, the obsession with corruption, the physical darkness, it's all there. Our story begins with Ben Reilly, who retired from being Spider-Man, or the Spider, as they say in the series, after losing his fiancée 5 years earlier.
And right off the bat, this series is already different from the comics, for 3 major reasons.
First, Spider-Noir in the comics is not Ben Reilly at all. It is actually Peter Parker. The original Spider-Noir comic takes place during the Great Depression, in New York City as it is festering with gangster crimes and political violence. Peter Parker is just a poor young man who can't even afford university, while the crime boss Norman Osborn secretly controls the city as the Goblin.
The comic leans heavily into the classic noir storytelling. Peter works alongside the Daily Bugle journalist Ben Urich, who is secretly known in the criminal underworld as the Spider. During an investigation into stolen artifacts, Peter discovered a mysterious spider idol that cracks open and swarms spiders, and one bites him, giving him these spider powers.
And unlike the traditional red and blue superhero suit, Spider-Man Noir builds his costume using parts of Uncle Ben's old World War I airman outfit. With the goggles, leather jacket, and a dark mask, the whole thing looks less like a superhero's outfit and more like a vigilante trying to hunt down mobsters in the alleyways. Which is exactly what he does.
The comic gets dark. Spider-Man kills Vulture to save Aunt May, which horrifies her, because she believes he crossed a line. That one central theme of noir storytelling: justice versus vengeance. Even when Peter has a chance to kill Norman Osborn later, he decides true justice means exposing the truth publicly instead of becoming another murderer.
This universe takes place in a very cynical world. Franklin Roosevelt is becoming president, Hitler is rising to power in Europe, money and crime is controlling the streets, while Spider-Man is trying his hardest to preserve some resemblance of justice and morality to the city, which is falling apart.
Second is that Ben Reilly himself is a massive departure from the source material, because in the main Marvel comics, Ben Reilly is a clone of Peter Parker.
And that comic comes from one of the most infamous storylines in the Spider-Man universe storyline, the Clone Saga.
Miles Warren, aka the Jackal, create clones of Peter Parker, and Ben Reilly is one of them. Instead of calling himself Spider-Man at first, he takes the identity of the Scarlet Spider with blue hoodie and a red suit combo that became iconic during the 90s.
And honestly, those who actually hate the Clone Saga usually admit that Scarlet Spider had a pretty cool design.
Ben does eventually become Spider-Man for a few period of time in the comics, and you honestly probably recognize him from Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, where he's voiced by Andy Samberg and acts so overdramatic with his cell shading.
I can't talk right now. I'm thinking about my past.
Actually, we need you here for some reason.
That was a particularly harrowing.
And third, and the most real-world reason for this changes, Sony's handling of the Spider-Man rights has always been complicated.
Now, to be fair, Sony has had successes in the past. The animated Spider-Verse films were incredible, and the Insomniac Spider-Man games are some of the best superhero games ever made. Even the MCU collaboration with Disney worked out surprisingly well.
But when Sony tries building a Spider-Man universe without Spider-Man, that's when things are falling apart.
Venom made money because, well, people love Tom Hardy acting like a complete lunatic. It's enjoyable. But then Morbius became an internet meme for all the wrong reasons. And Kraven the Hunter struggled because audiences kept asking the same question. Why are we watching Spider-Man villains without Spider-Man?
Villains like Kraven, Venom, and Morbius work best because they're reflections of Spider-Man himself. They're stories that are tied directly to Peter Parker. Remove Spider-Man and a lot of emotional weight disappears.
It's why DC announcing a Clayface project is getting some interest. We already know Batman exists in this universe. Clayface matters because Batman is there to oppose him.
And Madam Web. Yeah, no offense. I grew up in the older comics and the 90s animated series. I would have the blind old crone basically telling me my fortune than whatever this movie is.
Which is why it's honestly refreshing that Spider-Man Noir actually works. Even with the changes in the series, it still understands why noir storytelling works and why people love dark interpretations of Spider-Man stories.
With the Spider retired, Silvermane slowly takes over the control of the city. And honestly, I feel like Silvermane is one of Spider-Man's most underrated villains. In the comics, he runs a massive criminal empire and eventually uses cybernetic enhancements to keep himself alive and powerful. He's not some colorful supervillain trying to destroy the universe. He's more like Kingpin or Hammerhead. Basically a mob boss, and the noir setting works perfectly.
Yeah, because organized crime is the heart of most noir stories. The city is not being threatened by aliens or giant portal lasers in the sky. It's corruption, gangs, crooked officials, and crime tightening its grip on the community of people that are suffering.
Meanwhile, Ben Reilly is living as a struggling private investigator, trying desperately to stay away from the danger. He doesn't want to be the Spider anymore. After losing his fiancée, putting the mask on, reopening old wounds, and stepping back into a life already destroyed him once.
And I love how they depict his spider sense. Normally, Spider-Man's spider sense is portrayed as this sort of warning signal, essentially a gut feeling, which in the comics is an uneasy tingle in the back of his head that is telling him danger is coming.
Here though, it feels like a goddamn migraine.
Exactly. It's painful. Like his own body is rejecting him, hiding from the idea of responsibility. Ben is trying to ignore the call as the city keeps screaming around him that they need Spider-Man again.
It's almost like psychological torture. Every time crime escalates, every time innocent people are in danger, this spider sense keeps pulling him back towards the mask.
And the city just keeps getting worse. There's even a noir version of Sandman whose abilities start affecting other people, creating chaos throughout the streets. Mobsters are literally barging through the door, raising their guns up, and Ben's instincts immediately tell him that he has to sling webs and stop them or just do something.
But he restrains himself.
Which honestly makes those moments even more intense than an actual fight scene. Because the conflict isn't whether Spider-Man can win, because we already know he can. The conflict is Ben trying to convince himself not to become Spider-Man again.
The first few episodes feel like a recreation of Spider-Man No More, through a noir detective lens. A broken man trying to retire from being a hero while the city slowly falls apart without him.
While most people know Black Cat as the seductive cat burglar from the main comics, the noir universe completely reimagines her. Instead of a high-tech thief swinging across the rooftops, she is a nightclub owner and lounge singer operating in the underbelly of New York's crime world.
And honestly, Noir Felicia, or Cat Hardy, might be one of the coolest reinterpretations of the character.
But due to his close friends being caught in harm's way, Ben decides to don the suit once again to become Spider-Man to save them.
Another character that the story puts a surprising amount of focus on is Robbie Robertson. Now, a majority of Spider-Man fans know Robbie as one of the journalists working for the Daily Bugle in the mainline comics, usually acting as one of the more reasonable voices compared to J. Jonah Jameson.
And honestly, that's still true here. He is still a journalist in both the comics and the show, but in this darker setting, it gives his character a completely different atmosphere.
But in the noir story, journalism isn't reporting the news. It is extremely dangerous. These reporters are uncovering corruption, mob activity, murders, and political conspiracies. One wrong article can get somebody killed.
Robbie feels like the generally only decent person left in the whole city. He has this grounding charm to him that makes him instantly likable. He's calm, he's intelligent, and unlike most people in noir stories, he hasn't lost his humanity.
Especially the fact that it's the 1930s and Robbie is black, meaning heavy segregation on his words. Anyway, the Spider returns, and honestly the first fight feels like a lot of fun. Right away you can tell this version of Spider-Man is different from the traditional Peter Parker we're used to.
Yeah, this isn't the cheerful neighborhood Spider-Man throwing out jokes while stopping bank robbers. This is a noir vigilante who is hardened by loss, violence, and the fact that he's been watching the entire city rot from the inside out for years.
And believe me, this Spider-Man will kill if it's truly the last resort. Just like in the noir comics, he's willing to cross the line in the mainland Spider-Man normally wouldn't do.
Which kind of makes the fights even more dangerous because Ben is constantly trying to balance on this moral edge. He doesn't want to become a killer, but this world is so brutal that it sometimes offers him impossible choices and he needs to survive.
The confrontation with Silvermane especially shows that tension. Ben tries to warn him, basically telling him the Spider is back and the city isn't his to own.
But because this is a noir, things immediately spiral out of control.
Exactly. What starts a tense confrontation escalates to complete chaos when the police suddenly open fire during a booze exchange.
And that scene perfectly captures the corruption of the setting. In most Spider-Man stories, the police are at least trying to stop crime. Here, you can't tell half the time who is actually panicking, who is dirty, and who is trying to cover something up.
Because of the disaster at that booze raid, Silvermane starts looking for answers. Somebody tipped off the police. Now he wants to know exactly who's responsible. That eventually brings him to Ben Reilly, who finds himself caught in the middle of a dangerous investigation.
And one thing I do love about this show is how much improvising Ben, aka Nicolas Cage, has to do. He's a great detective, but half the time he's basically making things up as he goes along.
Seriously, the amount of nonsense this guy is getting away is hilarious. One minute he's pretending to be a plumber just to get into the building that he buried his suit. Next, he's creating disguises so he can question wounded police officers if that was in the raid.
It's very different from the usual storyline where Spider-Man generally relies on gadgets and science. Ben's detective work feels more like an old-time investigator bluffing his way into places he really shouldn't be, but he gets in anyway.
I gotta give credit for how crazy Nick Cage can pull these off, because it makes me wonder, did he actually improv these scenes? And honestly, that's part of the charm. Watching him scramble to stay one step ahead of criminals, corrupt cops, even Silvermane's men, to some generally entertaining moments.
Meanwhile, Robbie Robinson is doing what good journalists always do, following the story wherever it takes him. He ends up photographing a police raid in a Hooverville, aka a black community and homeless encampment, where it is, well, one of the more unsettling moments in the show, yet one of the most historically realistic moments in the show.
This scene does a good job showing how ugly and desperate this version of New York can be. And this was real history back in the 1940s. It's not just gangsters causing problems, it's the city itself feeling broken.
And that's where we meet Lonnie Lincoln, better known to Spider-Man fans as Tombstone.
Tombstone. One of Spider-Man's most memorable crime bosses for decades. In the comics, Lonnie Lincoln grew up in Harlem and endured constantly bullying, gang violence during his childhood. Eventually, he was exposed to an experimental chemical known as Diox-3, which basically bleached his skin chalk white and gave him superhuman durability and strength.
The result is a guy who looks like a corpse but hits like a freight train.
And if you watch Spider-Man media over the years, you've probably seen Tombstone somewhere. He appeared in the Spectacular Spider-Man, the Spider-Man 90s cartoon, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the Spider-Man Insomniac games, and of course, he's also a character in Spider-Man Brand New Day.
He's one of those villains that doesn't always get the spotlight like Green Goblin or Dr. Octopus. But whenever he does show up, he's usually a very serious threat. He's strong, intimidating, and perfectly fits a noir crime story where mob bosses control the streets.
Ben eventually discovers a lead connected to more of these powerful individuals. But before he can get, not long afterward, Cat Hardy arrives, and pieces start to fall in place. Ben discovers that Cat was the one who tipped off the authorities about the raid, and the problem is that exposing her would put her indirectly in Silvermane's crosshairs, and despite everything, Ben isn't willing to let that happen.
Naturally, Ben comes up with the most Spider-Man solution ever imagined. If he needs money to keep people silent, why not just steal from the mob?
Specifically, steal from Silvermane.
And this sequence gives us a bunch of really cool details. First, when we see Spider-Man sneak into Silvermane's penthouse, we see his eyes glow, suggesting that he has some kind of night vision built into the mask.
Which actually is a neat historical twist. Real-world night vision was in its infancy during the era this story is inspired by. Early infrared camera technology was being developed in the early 20th century, and practically military-grade night vision devices wouldn't become widespread until later. But this is an alternate universe, so I'll happily accept Spider-Man having some experimental detective gear.
The second thing I love is that Ben can actually use his spider sense to crack a safe. It's just so noir.
We all know the spider sense is one of Spider-Man's most powerful abilities, but it's usually shown as a danger detector. Here, it almost functioned like an instinctive guidance system.
Exactly. Instead of warning him against a punch or a bullet, it's helping him identify the correct combination numbers. It's a very creative application to use the power that we don't see often enough in other Spider-Man media.
To be honest, I vaguely remember him using the spider sense to defuse a bomb or navigate complicated machinery, but using it during a heist feels almost practical.
Meanwhile, things get worse for Robbie Robinson. His investigation around the Hooverville camps gets buried under speculation and misinformation.
Which unfortunately reflects a lot of real-world history. During the Great Depression, Hooverville became symbols of poverty and depression, and media coverage often painted events in ways that protected those in power while ignoring the suffering of ordinary people.
I do appreciate that the story doesn't shy away on how corruption, media manipulation, can shape public perception.
And then everything completely falls apart when Ben and Cat are captured by Silvermane.
Which leads to one of the smarter schemes in the series.
Earlier, Silvermane had a habit of secretly marking his money so he could keep track where it went. Ben figured it out and tricked that against him.
By mimicking markings on Silvermane's money and giving it to other mobsters, he convinces him that corruption is occurring in his own organization.
The result is basically Silvermane killing 2 of his own generals.
That's another thing that separates this from a traditional Spider-Man story. Ben does not defeat every enemy with his fist. Sometimes he wins by using information, deception, and detective work.
As Ben digs deeper into the mystery surrounding Flint Marko, he starts uncovering connections that go far beyond ordinary crime. The trail eventually leads him to Lonnie Lincoln, and Ben tries to get answers from him directly.
And the most interesting revelation about the series is the powers don't come from these random accidents. They actually are experiments done in Germany during World War I.
Which immediately raises a ton of questions. What kind of experiments? Who funded them? How many people were affected? The mystery starts growing beyond Silvermane's criminal empire.
Meanwhile, Ben has this quiet moment with Kat where he finally opens up about his fiancée. Up to this point, he's been carrying around that grief like a weighted chain around his neck.
It's one of the stronger character scenes in the show because of the brief moment Ben isn't Spider-Man, or detective, or symbol of hope. He's just a man who just lost someone he loved.
Of course, since this is Spider-Man, the conversation doesn't last long before another craze-powered lunatic crashes into the story.
Electro!
Well, sort of.
Yeah, this isn't Electro. This isn't Max Dillon in general. This is Dirk Layden, also known as Megawatt. Yeah, he's basically an obscure Spider-Man villain who possesses electrical abilities similar to that of Electro, but there's not much on him.
The difference is that Electro is usually portrayed as much stronger. Max Dillon can become quite a powerhouse when writers let loose with his abilities. Megawatt is dangerous, but he's generally operating on a smaller scale.
So the fight is pretty awesome. It gives Ben another chance to show off how resourceful he is, because unlike Superman, Spider-Man doesn't win by overpowering enemies. He wins by adapting. And believe me, considering the fact that his suit isn't electricity-proof compared to that of Spider-Man, he's gonna get electrocuted constantly.
Thinking on his feet, using the environment, and finding weaknesses has always been Spider-Man's greatest strength.
After Spider defeats Megawatt, the city starts seeing him directly. Crime is rising, Silvermane's influence is growing, and the mayor becomes desperate.
Which leads to the show's one of the more interesting political angles. The mayor wants to use Spider-Man as a publicity stunt for his election.
Basically, he wants the Spider to become the symbol that the city's fight against crime. If the police can't fight Silvermane, maybe a masked vigilante can.
The problem is that Ben never signed up to be a political mascot for the mayor.
Exactly, the mayor sees an opportunity. Ben sees a city that's falling apart, and Silvermane sees a threat that needs to be eliminated.
Which means the conflict is no longer Spider-Man versus gangsters. Now he's caught between politicians, criminals, the police, and the people of the city who are looking for someone, anyone anyway, to save the city.
And what's worse for Ben is that Cat finally figures it out. He's the Spider.
To be absolutely fair, Ben wasn't exactly subtle. The guy literally disappears every time Spider-Man shows up, he has mysterious injuries, and knows a lot more than he should.
Once the secret is out, Ben finally tells her the truth of how he became the Spider. And this is where it makes one of the biggest departures from the comic.
Because in the original Spider-Man Noir comics, Spider-Man gains his powers through, well, more of a mystical reason. He's bitten by a spider released from a mysterious spider idol, which ties into the supernatural web life of destiny that is forced between the spider totems throughout the Spider-Verse.
The show throws it out the window.
Instead, Ben reveals years earlier he was fighting in France during World War I. While help liberating a small French town from German forces, he discovers a secret project being conducted on human test subjects, basically prisoners of war.
And these weren't ordinary military experiments. The Germans attempted to splice animal DNA into people, creating enhanced humans with animal traits and abilities, similar to how you see both Morbius and the Lizard.
And considering rumors of other Spider-Man projects, it wouldn't surprise me if Man-Spider popped up somewhere down the line in the future.
Which is funny because Man-Spider is actually a real thing at Marvel. Spider-Man transformed into a giant spider monster multiple times throughout comic history, and the fans of the 1990s animated series probably remember this absolutely nightmare-filled version that appeared during the show's final seasons. What I find interesting is that the show uses this origin to connect many of the powered characters together.
Exactly. Instead of gaining their powers through these random accidents, they gain their powers from the same experimental source in Germany.
Lonnie Lincoln, Flint Marko, Dirk Layton, and several others all appear to be products of the same scientific program in one way or another.
Which gives the series a different feel from the traditional Spider-Man story. Rather than random comic book accidents creating villains every week, all these villains come from a shared conspiracy.
It turns the story into more than just a Spider-Man fighting bad guys. Now Ben is uncovering a decades-old secret involving war crimes, human experimentation, and the origin of the city's most dangerous individuals.
And honestly, for a noir detective story, that works really well. The more Ben investigates and the deeper he goes, the more it feels like he is stumbling across something that is much bigger than Silvermane's crime empire.
Things somehow get even worse when Tombstone and Sandman break Megawatt out of jail. At that point, you know Silverman isn't playing defense anymore. He's preparing for war.
Yeah, the second that you see those three standing together, you know the situation has gone completely off the rails.
Silverman even invites Ben Riley to a friendly meeting. And by friendly, I mean he's sitting across from Silverman while Sandman, Tombstone, and Megawatt are standing right there beside him.
That's not a meeting, it's a hostage situation with better manners.
Meanwhile, Ben explains something horrifying to Kat. Flint Marko, Lonnie Lincoln, Dirk Layton, and the others aren't just victims of experiments, they're dying.
It turns out that the German scientists never perfected the process. The powers, of course, come with a cost. The further they use their powers, the faster their bodies start to break down.
Their powers are basically accelerating their death clocks.
Which suddenly makes the villains more tragic in a way. They're not just criminals abusing their powers, they're desperate people that are running out of time.
As for Ben, he doesn't know why his powers aren't killing him. And for a brief moment, things actually seem hopeful. Ben and Kat are growing closer together, and there's a chance to save everyone.
But we have to remember one important thing.
It's a Spider-Man story.
And Spider-Man relationships are legally prohibited from ever being happy.
Seriously, Peter and Gwen, Perry and Mary Jane, and Peter and Felicia Hardy, if you're dating Spider-Man, your life expectancy drops dramatically.
Sure enough, right after their relationship has started, Kat reveals Ben's identity as Spider-Man to a scientist and a doctor who are looking for a cure.
One of the doctors, Ogben, explains the situation. If Robbie published that story exposing the experiment, the funding and research will disappear, and any hope of creating a cure for the victims, including his own accelerated aging condition, is gone.
Ben sympathizes with the doctor, however, before he can do anything, he is knocked out, drugged with a toxin, and strapped to a hospital bed.
Which led to one of the creepiest sequences in this show.
Through flashbacks and hallucinations, we see the trauma that Ben had to go through in the original Spider Bite. He feels the itching, the pain, and the transformation. He remembers objects sticking to him and develops spinnerets.
And Dr. Faber starts studying him in the present.
What's fascinating is, despite all these years, Ben's body is stable. The spider mutation has not broken him down like the other mutations,
which makes him the key to a cure.
Unfortunately, this revelation sends Dr. Faber off the deep end.
And enter the Nicolas Cage freakout!
Seriously, if you've ever seen Nick Cage lose his mind in a movie, that's basically the energy here. Oh yes, and Faber becomes obsessed with him.
He created a serum using Ben's blood and injects his son. Miraculously, it works. His son returns to normal.
Oakman immediately wants Ben released. After all, they have proof that the cure works.
Unfortunately, Faber's mother has other ideas.
And by other ideas, they mean keeping Ben indefinitely so they can experiment on him or eventually just kill him.
Luckily, Ben actually escapes, but he is far from 100% fine.
The experiments weaken him and his spider senses become stronger, being harder to control.
At the same time, Robbie publishes a story exposing the laboratory and the experiments to the entire city.
Which means Silvermane knows exactly where the cure research is located.
And, well, everything explodes.
Literally.
As for Silvermane's forces close in, Faber desperately promises that he can finish the cure if given more time.
Ben doesn't have that luxury. He's exhausted, weakened, and can barely put himself together, but he still has to put on the suit.
Because that's what Spider-Man does.
Of course, things get even worse thanks to Megawatt, who reacts with all the emotional stability of a lit stick of dynamite.
In a fit of rage, he unleashes powers and set the entire laboratory ablaze. And all Ben can do is escape as the building burns behind him, knowing the city is about to descend into complete chaos.
Yeah, if there's ever a Spider-Man that needed therapy, it's this one.
Instead, he chooses the traditional unhealthy coping mechanism of a noir protagonist everywhere.
Alcohol.
Lots and lots of alcohol.
And at one point, he even starts a bar fight, and it's a point where you can see how truly broken he has become. Ben isn't fighting because he's trying to be a hero. He's angry, frustrated, and scared.
Nothing says I'm holding this situation perfectly like trying to fill the emotional crater in your heart with enough alcohol to fill an ocean.
But Robbie, being a good supporting friend, tells Ben the one thing he doesn't want to hear.
He's desperate for a solution. Not just for himself, but for everyone suffering from the experiment. Robbie points out that Ben is suffering the exact same way Silverman's victims are. Maybe not physically to the same degree, but emotionally? Oh, absolutely.
That is, of course, he is destroying himself.
That's one of the reasons why I love Robbie in this series. He isn't just Ben's journalist friend, he acts like Ben's conscience whenever Spider-Man is too stubborn to listen to himself at times.
And then we get one of the most funniest reveals in the show.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention about Janet. Janet is possibly one of the best things in this series, and I love her. Especially the fact that she knew he was Spider-Man this entire time.
And the reason she knows is honestly hilarious. Ben apparently gets drunk so often he is the worst secret keeper in New York.
Because
I'm a spider, Janet. I spider.
Nice work if you can get it, then you can get it.
The spider's busy, Janet. Can't you see that the spider's busy?
Waiting at the cottage door, loving one who loves you, and then taking that vow. Nice work if
I'm your spider, be my spider, to be real.
It is one of the moments that, despite all the dark noir and conspiracy theories and trauma and tragedy, the show still knows how to have fun with its characters.
Because sometimes the greatest detective mystery in New York isn't who Spider-Man is.
It's somehow Ben thought that nobody would notice.
Eventually, Spider tracked down another raid and finds himself face to face with his tombstone. By this point, Ben is exhausted, running on fumes, and barely holding himself together. but he knows he can't stop now.
And this is not just another fight. Ben has something new to his advantage, a potential cure.
Exactly. Instead of simply beating up Tombstone to submission, Ben actually tries to use the cure on him, which basically is a Spider-Man thing. Instead of trying to beat him, he's actually trying to save him.
Which is honestly one of the most Spider-Man-ish things imaginable. He's not seeing Lonnie as a monster, but seeing him as more of a victim.
A victim who can punch the walls, sure, but still a victim. Even the regular Peter Parker would do everything to save his enemies.
Doc? Doc? Doc, take me.
It's so quiet. Those voices inside my head. I'd almost forgotten.
The cure actually works, of course, and shows that Ben maybe all this suffering isn't for nothing.
Of course, this is a noir story. The situation immediately gets very worse.
The police decide to spring an ambush.
Yeah, apparently nobody in the city has a normal conversation without somebody open firing. Those moments that reminds you why Spider-Man is a hero. He doesn't just save innocent civilians, he'll risk his life to save someone who technically his enemy.
Ben and Tombstone manage to escape, but the fight does take a toll on him.
By this point, everyone around him can see it. Cat sees Janet, Robbie. Ben desperately wants to keep fighting, but his body is telling him to get some rest.
Unfortunately, Spider-Man has this long history of ignoring medical advice.
It's basically one of his superpowers.
Meanwhile, Robbie has a really great scene with Ben. Despite all that has happened, the chaos, the violence, and all the mistakes that Ben has made, Robbie still believes in him.
He tells Lonnie that Spider-Man is just a good man. Just a good man trying to do the right thing in a city that keeps giving him reason to quit.
Not a perfect man, nor a flawless hero. And honestly, that's been the core of Spider-Man since 1962. Peter Parker, Ben Reilly, Miles Morales, Miguel O'Hara, any of them, it doesn't matter who is under the mask. But what makes this situation even more interesting is that both the Mayor and Silvermane arrive at the same conclusion. They discover that Tombstone has been cured. Somehow, someway, Spider-Man has reversed the effects of the experiments.
Which means one thing.
Spider-Man has more of the cure,
or at least knows how to make it.
Suddenly, the Spider stops just being another vigilante running around New York. He is now carrying one of the most valuable things in New York City.
A cure.
For Silvermane, that cure could cost him his power.
Meanwhile, the Mayor sees entirely different opportunity.
If Spider-Man can cure the people with superpowers, he can save lives, calm public panic, and potentially solve one of the biggest issues in New York.
So both men are hunting for the same thing.
Spider-Man.
And the funny part is that neither of them know where to begin, which leads them to the same unfortunate conclusion.
Get me Ben Reilly.
Megawatt and Sandman end up finding Ben Reilly before anyone else can, and that's when everything starts falling apart.
More importantly, Megawatt starts remembering things.
Yeah, he starts getting flashes of the POW camp in France. Faces, experiments, soldiers, and eventually he remembers Ben.
Which is a huge problem because the conspiracy board in his head is now connecting all the strings.
So Ben gets dragged before Silvermane, who getting increasingly frustrated. His men are being cured, his powers are slipping, and this mysterious spider is ruining everything.
Silvermane basically gives Spider-Man an ultimatum. Find Spider-Man, bring him the cure, and make this whole problem go away.
The problem is Ben is Spider-Man.
And Ben isn't exactly in a cooperative mood. Cap betrayed him, he's extremely injured, and he's sick of everybody trying to use him.
So, he refuses.
Unfortunately, Silvermane has leverage.
Lots of leverage.
Robbie and Janet are brought into the situation, and things get very tense. And to make matters even worse, Megawatt remembers Ben from the POW camp and finally starts putting the pieces together.
Ben tries to bluff his way out.
Ben's explanation is essentially, oh yeah, I saved Spider-Man's life in the POW camp is why I know him.
Which sounds ridiculous the second it leaves from his mouth.
Nobody buys it, of course.
Especially when Silvermane decides to use Cat as a hostage to force the truth out of him.
Meanwhile, Ben is trying not to panic while having web-spurting spasms underneath the table as he is trying to shoot webs.
That's when Robbie does something incredibly brave.
Or incredibly stupid. He walks in wearing the Spider-Man suit.
Ben immediately realizes what happened and tries to warn him not to push it too far.
But by then, it's too late.
Megawatt injects Robbie with the cure and shocks him, expecting some dramatic revelation. Megawatt being so ego-driven, he decided to call it quits and not help Silvermane anymore.
Naturally, everything explodes from there.
Robbie is unmasked, the deception falls apart, and Ben finally has no choice.
He webs up the goons and reveals himself as Spider-Man, and dons the suit for the final battle.
And honestly, this fight is great.
Is it as massive as the Spider-Man movies?
No.
But it doesn't need to be.
It fits into the story, it fits into the time period, it fits into the budget, but most importantly, it fits with these characters.
This isn't a battle to save the multiverse. It's a desperate street-level fight done by people who are desperately trying to survive.
Spider-Man against Megawatt, Spider-Man against Sandman. It's basically chaos everywhere.
Meanwhile, Cat finally gets her confrontation with Silvermane.
And the true noir fashion, it's like a hall of mirrors.
The symbolism is almost too perfect. Lies, deception, and hidden identities are all exposed.
And a bullet.
Cat shoots Silvermane, ending his reign over the city.
Megawatt intentionally celebrates, thinking he won.
The crowd has a different opinion, however.
They boo him.
Which sends him into a rage.
He unleashes electrical powers on Spider-Man. Cat tries to intervene and gets electrocuted. Flint Marker tries to stop him. Unfortunately, sand and high voltage electricity does not mix very well.
By this point, Ben absolutely has nothing left in the tank.
Exhausted, injured, dying, barely standing.
But Spider-Man always finds a way.
With the last hit of strength, Ben sends Megawatt directly into the path of an oncoming train.
And just like that, it's over.
The city erupts and cheers for Spider-Man.
But Ben isn't thinking about applause.
He's thinking about the people he can still save.
Flint, Marco, Cat, and the survivors.
He gives them the last remaining antidote, giving them a chance to live a life that was stolen from them years ago.
A chance to actually be happy.
And that's what I love about this ending. Ben doesn't just gut everything back. He doesn't magically erase the trauma. He doesn't undo the mistakes he made.
He gets his acceptance.
He finally understands that the spider isn't a curse.
It is a part of who he is as a character.
So, as the city begins to heal, a new case lands on his desk. Ben Reilly walks away not as a man running from Spider-Man,
but as a man who is willing to be Spider-Man again.
This is amazing. Honestly, this might be one of the best Spider-Man projects Sony has released in years.
That's a pretty bold statement.
And I stand by it. The story's fantastic, the detective elements work, the noir atmosphere is nailed perfectly, and every character feels like they belong in this world. The writers had a difficult task masking a Spider-Man story without Peter Parker as the lead, and somehow they pulled it off. Hell, I heard there might be theories that Ben Reilly is just an alias, and this is Peter Parker using the name Ben Reilly as an alias.
Which is impressive because Spider-Man is not just the costume, he is the struggle.
Exactly. It's the balancing act between responsibility and personal happiness. It's getting knocked down over and over again and still finding the strength to stand back up. And for the record, Nicolas Cage encouraged fans to watch the black and white version of the show to honor film noir. I love film noir. I love the Marvel Noir universe.
And Ben Reilly embodies that throughout the entire show. He loses people, he makes mistakes, and he falls apart emotionally. He also drinks too much and pushes people away, but when people need help, he puts the mask on.
That's Spider-Man.
Seriously, the reason that Sony has had big issues with Spider-Man spin-offs is because they have forgotten why people love the characters to begin with.
Venom found some sort of success because Tom Hardy is entertaining enough to carry the movie.
But then you had Morbius, Kraven, and Madam Web, which struggled because they were trying to build a universe without Spider-Man for some reason.
That's difficult to sell. Characters like Morbius, Kraven, and many other iconics because of their relationship with Spider-Man. Their stories are strengthened by that rivalry.
Even though Peter Parker isn't the protagonist, they still understood what made a Spider-Man story work.
The responsibility,
The sacrifice,
the guilt,
the determination,
and importantly, the hope.
Ben Reilly spends most of the series trying to run away from being the Spider. By the end, he finally accepts that being Spider-Man isn't a burden that he carries.
It's who he is.
That's why the ending works so well. He doesn't become rich, he doesn't get everything he lost back, he doesn't suddenly have a perfect life.
He just finds peace with himself.
Which is the most Spider-Man ending imaginable.
And as always, thanks for watching!
Like and subscribe, and we'll be seeing you soon.